The war that killed more people than World War I, but vanished from history. 50 million dead. Between 1850 and 1864, a civil war raged in China that claimed more lives than World War I, more than the American Civil War, more than the Napoleonic Wars. It was the second deadliest conflict in human history, surpassed only by World War II. Yet most people in the West have never heard of it. This is the story of the Taiping Rebellion, the war that nearly destroyed China and then disappeared from memory. In 1837, a young man named Hong Xiuquan sat for the imperial examination in Canton, southern China. He was 23 years old, the son of Hakka peasants who had sacrificed everything to give him an education. Passing the exam would mean a government position, wealth, and respect. Hong failed. It was his third attempt. He returned home in disgrace. On the street in Canton, a Chinese Christian missionary had handed Hong a pamphlet. The text contained Bible passages and Christian teachings translated into Chinese. Hong had glanced at it briefly, then tucked it away. He was too devastated by his failure to care about foreign religion. Days after returning home, Hong collapsed. He fell into a fever that lasted 40 days. During this time, his family watched as he thrashed in bed, shouting about demons and angels. He spoke of ascending to heaven. He described meeting an old man with a golden beard who told him he was his son. He talked about a middle-aged man who called him younger brother and gave him a sword to slay demons. When Hong finally recovered, he tried to return to normal life. He became a village school teacher. But the visions haunted him. For 6 years, he couldn't make sense of what he'd experienced. Then in 1843, a Christian relative reminded him of the pamphlet he'd received years earlier. Hong retrieved it and began reading. Everything clicked into place. The old man with the golden beard was God the Father. The middle-aged man was Jesus Christ, his older brother. Hong realized what the vision meant. He was the second son of God, the younger brother of Jesus Christ, sent to earth to drive out demons. And the demons, he understood, were the Manchu rulers of China's Qing Dynasty. Hong began preaching his new revelation. He claimed that God had commanded him to establish the heavenly kingdom of great peace on earth. He baptized followers in rivers. He smashed Confucian tablets in temples, declaring them idolatrous. He gained disciples who believed in his divine mission. Within a few years, thousands followed him. By 1850, he commanded an army. On January 11, 1851, Hong Xiuquan declared the establishment of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. Taiping meant great peace. His army had swelled to over 10,000 followers, many of them poor peasants, miners, and marginalized Hakka people who faced discrimination in southern China. They were desperate for change. Hong offered them a vision of equality, land redistribution, and the new divine order. The Qing government responded with force. Imperial troops surrounded the Taiping stronghold in Jintian village, Guangxi province. The Taiping army broke through the siege. They marched north, gathering followers as they went. Villages welcomed them as liberators. The Taiping promised to overthrow the corrupt Qing Dynasty, redistribute land to the poor, and establish God's kingdom on earth. The Taiping army was unlike anything China had seen. Women fought alongside men, an unthinkable practice in traditional Chinese society. The Taiping banned foot binding, the practice of breaking young girls' feet to make them small. They banned prostitution, adultery, slavery, and opium. They prohibited alcohol and tobacco. Men and women were segregated, even married couples, to maintain purity. Property was held communally. Everyone was equal before God. By September 1851, the Taiping had captured the city of Yong'an. Hong established his government there, appointing kings and generals. He declared himself the Heavenly King, supreme ruler of the Heavenly Kingdom. His closest followers became princes. The administrative structure mimicked both Christian and traditional Chinese systems, creating something entirely new. The Qing Dynasty watched with growing alarm. This was not a typical peasant rebellion that could be easily suppressed. The Taiping had ideology, organization, and growing numbers. Imperial forces attacked Yong'an in December 1851. The siege lasted 4 months. The Taiping suffered heavy casualties, but broke out in April 1852, marching north toward the Yangtze River. As they advanced, the Taiping army swelled. Peasants joined by the thousands. Miners brought their tools, which became weapons. Secret society members saw opportunity for rebellion. Bandits joined for plunder. By 1853, the Taiping army numbered over 500,000. They were unstoppable. On March 19, 1853, the Taiping army reached Nanjing, one of China's greatest cities. Nanjing had been the capital of several Chinese dynasties. It was a cultural and economic center protected by massive walls and defended by Qing garrison troops. The city seemed impregnable. The Taiping laid siege. Starvation began to set in among Nanjing's defenders. On March 29th, Taiping troops breached the city walls. What followed was a bloodbath. The Taiping viewed the Qing soldiers as demons to be exterminated. Thousands of Manchu men, women, and children were massacred. The city's officials were executed. Anyone associated with the old regime was hunted down. The killing lasted for days. Estimates suggest 30,000 to 40,000 people died in the capture of Nanjing. Bodies filled the streets. The Yangtze River ran red. For the Taiping, it was divine justice. The demons had been slain. They renamed the city Tianjin, the heavenly capital. Hong Xiuquan established his palace there and declared Nanjing the center of the heavenly kingdom. From Nanjing, the Taiping controlled a vast territory. They ruled over 30 million people across southern and central China. They established a government with ministries, a tax system, and a military structure. They printed their own money. They conducted their own examinations for officials based on the Bible rather than Confucian classics. They were building an alternate Chinese state. But cracks were already appearing. Hong Xiuquan became increasingly isolated in his palace. He surrounded himself with concubines despite preaching sexual purity. He rarely appeared in public. The day-to-day administration fell to his subordinates, the Eastern King, Yangshu King, and the Northern King, Wei Tenghui. These men began competing for power. Meanwhile, the Taiping sent expeditions to capture Beijing and overthrow the Qing Dynasty completely. In May 1853, an army of 70,000 marched north. They came within 20 miles of Beijing before Qing forces and harsh winter weather turned them back. Another expedition moved west but was also repelled. The Taiping had captured vast territory but couldn't deliver the knockout blow against the Qing. Life in the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom grew increasingly oppressive. The initial promise of equality gave way to rigid hierarchy. Hong Xiuquan lived in luxury while ordinary followers faced harsh discipline. The segregation of men and women tore families apart. Married couples could be executed for living together. Violating any of the Taiping's moral codes meant death. The economy collapsed. The Taiping's policy of communal property meant no one could own land or accumulate wealth. Farmers had no incentive to produce surplus. Trade broke down as merchants fled. The Taiping printed money with no backing, causing inflation. People starved in territories under Taiping control. The Heavenly Kingdom was becoming hell on earth. In 1856, the leadership imploded. Yangshu King, the Eastern King, had been claiming to speak with God's voice. He outranked Hong Xiuquan in practical authority. Hong grew jealous and fearful. He secretly ordered Wei Tenghui, the Northern King, to assassinate Yang. On September 2, 1856, Wei's troops attacked Yang's residence in Nanjing. Yang was hacked to pieces. His family was slaughtered. His followers, over 20,000 people, were systematically hunted down and killed over the following weeks. The massacre shocked the Taiping leadership. Shi Dakai, the assistant king, confronted Wei about the mass killings. Hong, fearing Shi might rebel, ordered Wei's execution. Wei was killed in November 1856, but the damage was done. Shi Dakai fled Nanjing with 100,000 loyal troops, taking a significant portion of the Taiping's military strength with him. The Heavenly Kingdom was fracturing. Outside Nanjing, the war intensified. The Qing Dynasty, initially weakened by the rebellion, was regrouping. Regional armies led by Chinese generals rather than Manchu nobles proved more effective. Teng Guofan organized the Xiong army in Hunan. Li Hongzhang created the Huai army. These forces were better trained, better motivated, and better led than the corrupt Qing banner armies. The fighting became increasingly brutal. Neither side took many prisoners. Captured soldiers were executed. Cities changed hands repeatedly, each time accompanied by massacres. The civilian population was caught in the middle, forced to choose sides or be killed as collaborators. Entire regions were depopulated. The Western powers watched the Taiping Rebellion with intense interest. Britain, France, and the United States had forced China to open its ports to foreign trade after the Opium Wars. They had established settlements in Shanghai and other coastal cities. The Taiping threatened these interests. Initially, the West was sympathetic to the Taiping. They were Christians, after all, or claimed to be. Missionaries hoped the Taiping would Christianize China. Western governments thought the Taiping might be easier to deal with than the Qing. Some arms merchants sold weapons to both sides, profiting from the chaos. But as Western observers spent time in Taiping territory, their views changed. Hong Xiuquan's version of Christianity was heretical, mixing Chinese folk religion with biblical concepts. The Taiping's economic policies were chaotic. Their treatment of foreigners was unpredictable. Most importantly, the Taiping threatened Shanghai, where Western merchants had significant investments. In 1860, the Taiping launched an offensive toward Shanghai. The threat galvanized the Western powers. Britain and France, which had just finished fighting another war against the Qing government, the Second Opium War, now decided to support the dynasty. The enemy of their trading partner was their enemy. Frederick Townsend Ward, an American adventurer, organized the always victorious army to defend Shanghai. The force consisted of Chinese soldiers trained and led by Western officers. They used modern rifles, artillery, and military tactics. Ward was killed in 1862, but British officer Charles Chinese Gordon took command. Gordon would later become famous for his death at Khartoum, but in China, he earned his reputation fighting the Taiping.
The Western-trained armies were devastatingly effective against the Taiping. They recaptured city after city around Shanghai. The Taiping, armed mostly with traditional weapons and relying on human wave tactics, suffered enormous casualties. The technological gap between the Taiping and their enemies was widening. By 1862, the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was collapsing. Territory was shrinking. Food shortages were severe. The leadership was incompetent. Hong Xiuquan retreated deeper into delusion, claiming divine revelations while his kingdom burned. His teenage son, Hong Tianguifu, was given increasing authority despite having no military or administrative experience. The Qing armies, Western-trained and Western-armed, tightened the noose around Nanjing. Zhang Guofan's Xiong army approached from the west. Li Hongzhang's Huai army advanced from the east. By early 1864, Nanjing was under siege. Supply lines were cut, starvation set in. People ate grass, bark, and finally, each other. Cannibalism became widespread in the besieged city. Hong Xiuquan refused to surrender. He declared that God would provide. He ordered his followers to eat manna, sweet dew that would fall from heaven. In reality, he was telling people to eat weeds. Hong himself fell ill in May 1864, possibly from eating poisonous plants. He died on June 1, 1864, either from illness or suicide by poison. His followers hid his death for weeks, claiming he had ascended to heaven. The Qing forces breached Nanjing's walls on July 19, 1864. What followed was one of the worst massacres of the entire war. Qing soldiers stormed through the city, killing indiscriminately. Men, women, children, anyone suspected of supporting the Taiping was slaughtered. The Taiping soldiers fought desperately. Thousands committed suicide rather than surrender. Hong Xiuquan's teenage son escaped, but was captured a few months later and executed. The death toll in Nanjing was staggering. Estimates range from 100,000 to over 300,000 dead. Bodies were piled in the streets. The Yangtze River was clogged with corpses. Zhang Guofan's troops systematically cleared the city, burning buildings and executing anyone who resisted. By August 1864, Nanjing was a ghost city, littered with the dead. The fall of Nanjing didn't end the war immediately. Taiping remnants fought on in scattered locations. Some fled to remote provinces and continued guerrilla warfare. Others joined other rebel movements. The last Taiping forces weren't defeated until 1871, but the heart of the rebellion died with Nanjing in 1864. The death toll of the Taiping Rebellion is almost incomprehensible. Historians estimate between 20 and 30 million people died, though some estimates go as high as 50 million. By comparison, World War I killed about 17 million. The American Civil War, happening at the same time on the other side of the world, killed about 750,000. The Taiping Rebellion was deadlier than both combined. The majority of deaths weren't from combat. Starvation killed millions. The war disrupted agriculture across China's most productive regions. Farmers couldn't plant or harvest. Trade networks collapsed. Famine swept through province after province. Disease followed. Cholera, typhus, and other epidemics spread through armies and refugee populations. Massacres and atrocities claimed millions more. Both sides engaged in ethnic cleansing, targeting civilian populations. Entire regions were depopulated. Jiangsu province, one of China's richest, lost half its population. Zhejiang province lost 40%. Cities that had held hundreds of thousands were reduced to ruins occupied by thousands. Villages were abandoned. Farmland returned to wilderness. The Yangtze Delta, China's economic heartland, would take decades to recover. The economic damage was catastrophic. China's GDP fell by an estimated 30 to 40%. The Qing government was bankrupted by military expenses. Infrastructure, roads, bridges, canals, and the Grand Canal was destroyed. China's position as a great power was shattered. The country that had been the world's largest economy was now vulnerable to foreign exploitation. If the Taiping Rebellion was so deadly and so significant, why did it vanish from Western memory? Several factors contributed to the historical amnesia. First, distance and timing. The rebellion happened in China, while the West was focused on its own conflicts. The American Civil War, the Italian unification, and European colonial expansion dominated Western attention. China was far away, difficult to reach, and not well understood. Western newspapers covered the rebellion sporadically, but it never captured sustained public interest. Second, the complexity of the conflict. The Taiping Rebellion didn't fit neat narratives. It wasn't a simple good versus evil story. The Taiping claimed to be Christians but practiced a strange hybrid religion. They promised equality but created a brutal theocracy. The Qing Dynasty was corrupt and foreign-ruled, but represented stability. Western powers initially sympathized with the Taiping, then switched to supporting the Qing. The moral ambiguity made the story difficult to tell. Third, the lack of survivors who could tell the story internationally. Unlike other major conflicts, few Westerners experienced the Taiping Rebellion directly. The missionaries and merchants who did were often discredited or forgotten. Chinese survivors were focused on rebuilding, not documenting. The Qing government, embarrassed by how close it came to collapse, downplayed the rebellion scale. The Taiping themselves,